Hi, thank you for coming on a Saturday night. I really appreciate that. We don't have any slides for you. We're going to try and make it more of a discussion. We really like it if you ask questions as we go along. Maybe we can speak a bit to the things you want to find out. We are here to talk about social media and subscriptions. And one of the things that I thought when I was pitching this panel is how different my job is as head of social at The Telegraph to jobs that I've done previously, which were very much about scale and how to achieve that. Under a subscription or paywall model, it's quite different. So I'm here with Tanith Evans, who's the head of audience at The Times with a big remit in a lot of different things, and Lucy Raw, who's the Snapchat editor at The Economist. So I think we should just start with talking a bit about what our jobs cover. So if you want to go first.
Yeah, so I'm head of audience at The Times and Sunday Times, and I often describe that to people in the newsroom as I'm their link between the newsroom and the readers, my team and the people that you come to when you want that bridge. But realistically, it's much more complex than that, as I'm sure you can imagine. So we look at growth and engagement and visibility. So we're the editorial team looking at acquisition and retention, which, as you all know, is more commonly kind of linked with marketing. So we're an interesting kind of bridge team between editorial, in which we're based, marketing, commercial, product, and probably any other role you could think of. So a really unique but exciting team to be in, I think.
Yeah. And your role is very different to that?
Yeah, I would say my role is a little more focused. Not to suggest that what you're doing is not highly focused. It's just I actually probably don't have as much work as you. That's probably the main difference. So I'm, as Beth mentioned, I'm The Economist's Snapchat editor. I'm actually changing jobs on Monday, and I'm going to become our stories editor, which is not a vastly different role, because I'm still going to be looking at how we tell Economist stories on short-form visual platforms. So a typical week for me, I'm based in New York at the moment, and my team is spread across Europe. I work with a couple of animators who are based in Romania. My deputy is in London, and then we have a designer in Spain. This was not done intentionally, it's just how things came together. And a week will begin with us deciding what we're going to do in our Discover edition. These aren't tied to news necessarily, nor are they tied to what the paper might be covering that week. Instead, we're choosing a subject that we think is of relevance and of importance to really any age group, but that we think will be of a special interest to 13 to 24-year-olds who are our main audience on these platforms. So, for example, I started off this week by writing a script on meth, the forgotten drug. While everybody's been focused on the opioids crisis in the States, levels of methamphetamine use have also increased, and there's unfortunately a significant number of deaths that are being caused by them. So what I'll do is I'll begin by, I read all the time. As a journalist, I'll have a think about, what I think would be of interest, as I said, on the platform. And then I'll read widely. I'll look at the coverage that we might have done. It's very important that we have covered the topic, because a part of our edition involves swiping up to articles that we have written on The Economist. In The Economist. But then I also do a lot of original research. I would say about 50% of any given Snapchat edition is original content. So I'll write a script. My background is visual journalism. I've been a visual journalist at The Economist for the past 11 years. And when I'm writing a script, for any of you who are familiar with script writing, you are thinking as much about how you're going to tell the story visually as you are through words. So write a script, brainstorm with my designer, and then once she's happy and I'm happy, she puts together some designs. I then get the animators involved, and away we go. And we publish a weekly edition. It comprises... Who's familiar with Snapchat Discover here? Okay, so everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say our editions comprise sort of 15 to 20 snaps. Some of that is just top snap only content. Some of it is swipe up. And yeah, we publish every Friday, so check it out.
And how well known is what you're doing on Snap throughout the newsroom?
Well, we're a very small newsroom compared with a lot of organizations. I mean, I think off the top of my head, worldwide, we have about 100 members of editorial staff. So pretty much any project, especially one which has as much visibility as this, people know what we're doing. Whether they understand what we're doing is quite a different question.
Yeah.
Do you want me to answer that as well?
Yeah, I do.
Short answer is I don't know, because I'm not sure how many of my colleagues are looking at what we're doing. But for the ones who do watch our stuff, obviously I'm going to cherry pick the nice stuff that they've said. Our China editor, China content always over-indexes for us, actually just across social in general. I don't know if it's the same for you guys. Yeah, for some reason people are always interested in China content. I think especially because the majority of our audience are in the States. There's a sort of fascination maybe I wonder if there is a fascination among American audiences for stuff on China. So we did an edition on sort of human rights in China, and the China editor wrote to me. He'd clearly seen the edition and thought that was great, and the way that you approached the story and framed it is something that we would have happily thought about doing in the original reporting. And we've had, so they're definitely, sometimes I'll get one of our journalists directly involved, especially if it's something like meth, where it's a controversial topic in some ways. How do we define meth? People who have numbers at their fingertips that I wouldn't necessarily have, and then they'll be paying attention. But I don't get the sense that all of our journalists are, while they're aware of our presence on the platform, I don't think that they're kind of closely monitoring it all the time.
And what about you? How much involvement do your journalists have in what that output looks like, wherever it may be?
It really differs depending on what it is, what it's about. We try as much as we can to kind of collaborate with the experts. So yeah, the same if we're doing something about a particularly difficult topic or something that we could really benefit from the expertise in, then we'll start to get them involved really early, right from the beginning. But also otherwise, I mean, mistakes, they're really, really good at telling us when we've made them. But great things, we have to push it a little bit more and kind of celebrate our success a little bit more, which I think is probably a sign of the infancy of the platform. Having a really brilliant Instagram story is seen as much different to having a really brilliant byline in print, and so it's part of our job is to really kind of increase that PR around the newsroom internally as well as externally.
Can I ask you a follow-up? In fact, both of you guys a follow-up to that. Do you find that if you have stories that get really big audiences, it will change the way in which your colleagues might view these endeavours that we're all involved in?
Yeah, that definitely happens, and it happened in my previous job more. I guess I've just been doing it longer, so I worked for the Manchester Evening News, which is a regional, and we used social to raise £1 million in 21 hours for a dog's home that had burned down. And when I went in the next day, it was different. The vibe was different. The way that people saw these tools that they could use was different. And it's kind of the same now at the Telegraph, although on a smaller scale. But one of the first conversations I had with one of our journalists about Instagram stories and Snapchat, she said, I think it's a weird idea that it disappears after 24 hours because, one of the joys of being a journalist is that you would take that paper home to your parents and they would keep it forever and they put it in a box and you don't have that same thing. So I personally, as the head of social, have to make a lot of these wins and screen grab them and say, look at this and look how many people saw it. And it's a big education piece, I think, around that.
Yeah, the same. And I don't think it's not a kind of willful ignorance. It's not a kind of, I'm not interested in this, I'm interested in the paper. I think it is because everyone's kind of, you pick up the paper, you have a look, and that's what you're kind of used to. And so it's not that people don't want to engage, it's that they're not used to it, and you have to put those wins in people's faces and get them kind of more engaged with it. And it's the same as, I think it's probably the same in not just newsrooms, but businesses around the world at the moment. It's just a cultural shift that we have to bring people along with us.
Yeah, and there's definitely something to be said, I think, for journalists' egos and big numbers. Definitely. To sit down with a journalist and say, 1 million people read this, then they're interested.
Yeah, and competition. And they liked it more than the Telegraph's version. That's what I'm always saying.
No, but that would be, like, to answer my own question, I think that if I think about what our weekly print circulation is versus the number of people who might look and spend time with a Snapchat edition, there is a discrepancy. That's just in part a reflection of the vast size of Snapchat as a platform. I mean, 187 daily users at last count versus our print. So we're obviously tapping into a really big audience, and by extension, the audience size is larger, by and large, than it might be for print circulation. And I do think that when you can throw a big number at colleagues who might be skeptical, it certainly doesn't hurt. But it is also, to your point, Tanit, it's a high-stakes game, because if you then screw up, it's a lot more people watching.
Yeah, it's true. And so I think with subscriptions, we end up in this really big funnel of trying to be a lot of things to a lot of different people. So, at a top level, people might occasionally read your stories. They might follow you on Twitter, Instagram, subscribe on Snapchat, engaging off platform, and then much later down the line, that would lead to a subscription. I think an interesting question is where social and what you're doing on Snap fits in that story of, what are your KPIs? What is the direct indication that this is a useful thing to do as a business?
I think that there are a couple of ways of thinking about answering that question. First thing is, I'm not convinced that KPIs are always the best way for measuring everything. So I'll sort of leave that aside for the moment. We aren't on Snapchat with the hope of converting 13-year-olds to print subscriptions next week. This is not remotely why we're on the platform. We see this as a long game. We see it as an opportunity to put our journalism in front of this vast audience that I just mentioned, and a vast young audience who it would be very difficult for us to reach otherwise. For people, and we've sort of discussed this yesterday, I know, for people who aren't familiar with us, and that's the vast majority of our audience, we get to introduce our journalism and to show people that, contrary to our name and the expectations that might raise, we don't just report on economics. We do a lot of reporting around liberal progressive causes, which obviously resonate very well with millennial and Gen Z audiences. We are a guide to the future. And we're not just talking about, this is coming, but this is coming and this is how to make sense of it. Another sort of core part of what we do at The Economist, whether it's in print or any of our digital offerings, is to sort of curate and filter the news and to try and cut out some of the noise and tell you what you need. So being able to put ourselves as we think we are in front of this audience is a very sort of effective way of introducing them to our journalism. It's a long game. Look, right now, thankfully, we're covering our costs. We're very happy with, how things are going on Snapchat for us. But to be honest, even if we weren't happy with the numbers, I think that, and we weren't putting our journalism in front of this vast audience, I think that the lessons from translating a legacy publisher into short-form visual content are ones that can be applied across any number of different platforms, the most obvious one being Instagram stories and Facebook stories, hence the creation of the stories department. But yeah, anyway, Tanit, you might have thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying about a long game. I think everyone with a brain at the moment is having to play that kind of long game when they're in a subscription business. And for me, if we've created a social video that a group of 18-year-olds are watching right to the end and sharing around with each other, that's a huge win. Even if they're not taking out a subscription right now, it means that when the time comes to think that they might, or the time to choose a news brand, then we'll be in their head. We're having them acting as advocates around their kind of peer group, which is really important, growing their relationship and nurturing that relationship as well. I think it's incredibly valuable. And when it comes to KPIs, I think that, so we, like many other news organisations, are encouraging our newsroom to think about engagement metrics at the moment, how long someone's spending on an article, are they reading it all the way through. And I think my team are the only exception to that rule, because sometimes their job is to introduce the brand to someone, sometimes their job is to get someone to click through, sometimes it's to get someone to subscribe, sometimes it's to get someone to share something. And so they have to look at KPIs so much more holistically and as a real kind of journey and a position in that, sorry for saying it, funnel. And kind of taking them all together rather than as a single kind of great thing.
Can I just add, I would add that for me, there's really only one metric that has ever mattered to me in our Snapchat editions, and that's the number of snaps that people are getting through on average. So we tend to do, as I said, sort of, let's say 15 snaps, and all I'm really interested in is how many snaps through an edition people are getting through on average, and time spent. And that's actually even secondary, because for me, the amount, obviously, like as a journalist, as an editor, I've put something together that I think is important from start to finish. The longer people spend with it, it's actually a pride metric more than anything. Well, at least I feel that they've been interested enough to stick around. Time spent is also of importance, but I mean, I think that often you can get really caught up in the number of uniques that you're getting, looking at stuff. And I think that, engagement, by which I really just mean how long people are spending with something, is key.
Yeah. And I wonder how using this data relates to sort of the news brand that you're working for, right? So I think that's like quite a dirty way to use data and a more clean, creative way, right? So if you knew that, like, for example, the Kardashians get a lot of clicks, you could just replicate that.
Like gaming the system, basically.
Yeah, you could replicate that forever, but it doesn't. I think the interesting thing about us being on this panel is that our newspapers have very set and obvious agendas and very set and obvious ways of working. And I wonder how you guys use that data to kind of show, okay, people want to read this, but we've got to do it in this way. How are we going to creatively bring those things together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's absolutely no point. It's a vanity metric. I can tell people that I've had 1 million clicks from Twitter, and it's nice and everyone celebrates, but it doesn't matter if they haven't kind of done anything off the back of it. And what I mean by that is the kind of conversion metrics, sure, like we all want to convert to subscribers, but also off site and in the platforms, have they deemed it important enough to show to the rest of their friends? Have they deemed it important enough to want to follow us forever now because now they think we're interesting enough? And I think you have to use those in tandem, but in two very different ways, because they are completely different audiences. And this is a cheap answer, so I'm sorry, but they're both as important as each other. They're so, if we only went for conversions and getting people to subscribe from social media, we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot. It's a tiny part of what we need to do, but a big part of what we need to do is to build that advocacy and build that kind of and it's not just awareness, but it's kind of support, and it's particularly with legacy brands, we're often seen as quite fusty or, a bit old man. And so the most that we can do to kind of break that perception down, that's still as valuable in my eyes as someone deciding to subscribe off the back of what we've done.
I think it's a really good question. I mean, I'm going to interpret what you're asking as well. We know, for example, as I've just said, that China content always over-indexes for us on Snapchat. We know that if we put drugs on the cover, it's going to perform well. We know that editions on sex are going to perform well. And I assume what you're partly asking as well. So the data shows you that these editions will over-index. Does that just mean that you become a slave to creating more content that's sort of along those lines, that maybe is more sensational or more salacious? I mean, The short answer is, I think this is a challenge. Well, no, there's no short answer. I think this is a challenge. Sorry.
Short answer is
Everyone
you
take a
just
nap.
do China, drugs and sex.
I think that and that this is a challenge that is facing not just people like ourselves. This is a challenge facing all journalists. And for me, the response is to kind of go back to our core values as a publisher. Very briefly, there are 5 that we identified in the ramp up to launching on the Discover platform. And I think that these are values that you see across all of our offerings. We see ourselves as a curated, finishable experience. So cutting out the noise, telling you what you need to know. We are have long been campaigners for sort of liberal progressive values. We have a global outlook on stuff. We're a guide to the future. If we're not doing that on any platform, if we're not embodying that in any of our digital offerings or in our print magazine every week, then we're not worth being The Economist anymore. That is our core value. So if we're not able to sort of strike a balance, and it's a very careful balance between that and engaging viewers, then we really need to go back to the drawing board again. And I guess I would say that in addition to that, I think that there are like basic journalism 101 rules for storytelling. I do believe that yes, people will always have, I think, maybe by design, we're always more inclined to be interested in reading something on sex or, decriminalization of prostitution or meth, hopefully, still to come. But I think that whether it's that or whether it's doing something far more abstract, we've done editions on consciousness, on Bitcoin, on, any number of things that you would associate with The Economist. It's about storytelling. And, Storytelling 101 tells us that we do have to entertain. We have to grab our audience. We have to show them straight away how this is relevant to them, especially given the time frame that we're working with some of these platforms. Mm-hmm. And then we have to really hold their hand and walk them through a narrative arc that gets them to the swipe up content that we tend to load towards the end of an edition. So yes, data, while it's tempting to just kind of gun for stories that are all about clicks, it would be completely missing the point of what we do as journalists at The Economist and what good journalism is, full stop, I would say. What do you think, Beth? Sorry, I talked for a long time there.
I think you're right. I think it's we definitely have to do a lot more work with our content that is behind a paywall to drag the story out more, to bring people into it more. It's not really enough to just tweet a headline, right, or just put it on Facebook and hope that people will be interested. You have to make them interested, and part of that is that you have to tell more of the story, especially where you can do it visually, or you can do it on Instagram stories, and you get a lot of context, and basically by the end of the process that you're going through visually, you should not want to do anything except read that story. And that's a lot of how we drive, I guess, registrations, subscriptions, and kind of people coming back to site.
And that balance is a really interesting one, isn't it? That kind of how you do it kind of differently as you would on another platform. And to me, it's because we've kind of historically classed our product as our newspaper. It's certainly at the Times, and I think probably elsewhere too. And we need to take it back to actually our product is our journalism, and our newspaper is a platform, our website is a platform, Facebook is a platform, Snap is a platform, and then you kind of start to be able to tell those really excellent stories that are akin to our core values and really sitting in what the Times, The Economist, The Telegraph do, but allowing that creativity to fit on a different platform. And, no one could tell me, maybe someone will tell me, no one could tell me that a print editor, if they could put the gif of Theresa May dancing into that place on the front of their newspaper, they wouldn't have. Nah. It's just because, you have to use the tools at your disposal. And luckily on social media we have a few more tools than we might historically have had on paper, and so it's that line, you know, people see it as a kind of how far can you push it, how far can you change it. To me, it's not a line, it's a kind of spoke, and you find the right format to tell that excellent story as you go along for the right platform.
I agree.
Thanks.
I think another thing worth talking about is this idea of quality journalism, which can sometimes, not always, be quite dry, and there are some definite weighty topics that you need to deal with.
What, you don't want a Snapchat edition on credit default swaps? Come on, Bear.
So I suppose the question is, can you be quality and be fun? And is there a good way to do that without it just seeming like dad dancing, right?
It's storytelling. It's all storytelling, and it's exactly, you know, the paper's fun in a way that's right for the paper, and so I don't think that you can be fun on social media, but you can't be fun over here. I think that was my impression of someone that works on the newspaper. I think it's just finding the right type of fun, but absolutely, because storytelling is an entertainment, and no matter what you're writing about, whether it's dry or, you know, I never ever thought I'd find so much entertainment in Brexit. But when it's written...
I'm glad you're still feeling that.
Yeah, I'm still there. When it's written, you know, when it's funny or when it's telling me something brand new that blows my mind, that's maybe I'm the only person that finds that fun. I don't know. But it's storytelling at its core is fun. You get an enjoyment from it, and again, it's just doing it right in the right place for the right platform, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I do think that there is a balance that needs to be struck. It's not sort of, when I'm thinking about what to put in a Snapchat edition, I think, well, this has to be fun. I think I'm thinking more about how can I, you know, present this very important subject in a way that is going to be engaging, thought-provoking, fun where fun makes sense. Just the same way that, you know, I'm not going to write a blog post about the opioids crisis and sort of, you know. I mean, I'm going to, you know, deploy humour or wit, to be more precise, where it's going to add levity to an edition and lift the edition. But I also think that maybe fun isn't quite the word I would be going for. I want to delight people. I was on a panel a little while ago with a friend and colleague of ours at the Wall Street Journal, Shaz Nanessa, and she used that word, and for me it's spot on, like, to delight. Okay, again, maybe not about the opioids crisis, but to have the experience of opening an edition or looking at an Instagram story in the same way that you know, ideally have the experience when you read something that's really well crafted in any of our publications. It should on some level delight you or at least be pleasing to you. And so I think, but yes, I definitely think that you can have fun. And I don't think that just because we're 176 years old, that means that, you know, somehow we're boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you change any of your content when you put it on Snap?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, like, half of our edition is original content. So of the, you know, 15 or so snaps that we're making every week, half of them will just be these top Snap only stories, or things that are specific for Snap. So we have fact or fiction that we always include. We do quizzes, we do polls, which are like features that are, you know, very, very popular on the Discover platform. But we also, I think one of the things that I like doing the most is these, what I would call a top Snap only story, which is sort of an every person story that draws on reporting we might have done and research I might have done. So for example, we did an edition on homelessness, and remember, you're talking to 13 to 24-year-olds. I think it's very important to convey to them, you know, just how easy it is to become homeless in a country like America, because a lot of these people just haven't had it, you know, it's so far off their radar. So doing a lot of research and compiling a very simple written timeline, you know, with limited text and a strong image to show how someone can easily go from, you know, missing a rent payment to falling ill at work, not having money for childminding and eviction. So there's a lot of original stuff, not always as gloomy as that, but along those lines as well. And then we include about on average, I would say 5 or 6 swipe ups, which are articles that we cut and paste into the edition. Unfortunately, on Snapchat Discover, you cannot link outside of the platform. One of the cool things about Instagram Stories, I think a lot of publishers are excited about, is that we can redirect people straight back to our site. So we have, coming back to this whole kind of subscriber journey and sort of questions about conversion, we at least have a clearer sense of, how people are coming to us. Hopefully not in a creepy way, but also that they straight away are redirected to our site where if they are interested, then they can kind of go deeper. Did that answer your question? Not really.
Yeah, no,
I think it kind of. What
yeah.
about you? Can you be fun and have you worked that one out yet?
Previous
The Telegraph.
Yeah, we do more light-hearted stuff, I think, but generally it's more about like how do we take this tone and make it work and build an audience around it. It's quite an interesting challenge. So, but I think you can look at things like The Economist, and you've got 3.1 million followers on Instagram, and obviously you can build a really, really big audience around themes that can be pretty heavy or could be dry.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how you got 3.1 million followers.
Oh, well, on our main feed?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about that separately?
We'll talk about it after.
But can I just say like one thing on the can you be fun thing? And this is something that I'm guessing, I don't know who in the room is involved with social media in the way that we guys are, we all are. But I think one of the really common misapprehensions that really bugs me when I tell people that I'm our Snapchat editor, they go, oh, how do young kids get The Economist? And this sort of assumption maybe that we need to be fun in order to be relevant to younger audiences, I think is completely wrong-headed. And I also think that the assumption that young audiences somehow need things to be dumbed down or simplified, shortened, whatever, is really to underestimate younger audiences and to seriously overestimate older ones. Yeah. So just there's my 2 cents.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of tell a different story in a different way on a platform, but we'd never dumb down a story for social media. I think that's misselling what we do, and actually eventually when they subscribe they're going to be like, what is this? This isn't what I let myself in for. So you're kind of setting yourself up for a fall by doing that too, I think.
Yeah. How much is it in your mind that you need to drive subscriptions at the Times?
Probably more in my mind than it is my team day to day doing the social media, because I'm looking at kind of many other things at the same time. But we do talk about kind of, and so we have a registration metric also, which I think you guys do, but for us it's hand over your email address, get 2 free articles a week. And that's a kind of much easier thing for people to be doing from social media. So actually that's a bit more important because it's an easier metric to understand. A subscription journey is so complex and you have to make so many decisions which often take you a long time to make, and you have to take so many actions. Sometimes our marketing team has a sale, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're giving something away for free, sometimes you get an espresso machine, you don't get that anymore but you used to.
Sometimes you have a Donald Trump.
Yeah. It's not fair for us to judge editorial teams upon subscription metrics because that's not what they should be driving to. We should use it to understand a wider journey, but it definitely shouldn't be the kind of judgment of our actions, I think.
That is interesting. I think we are probably more aware of it than that, and I think there's kind of a bit more work to do around where social fits within this model, because I always think, if you've subscribed to Netflix, are you going to sit around and wait for them to tweet the new thing that's out? Well, maybe, but maybe you actually now live in a different ecosystem whereby you go to that site every day and you consume a lot of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So where social sits within this funnel of engagement to subscription, I think is really interesting. And then on the other hand,
kind of what about those subscribers that you want to engage, and how much do you want to give them? How much do you want to kind of remind them that you're there in their really periphery when they're not on the website? And how do you? Because I completely agree with the Netflix thing. And how do you balance them? I don't know the answer.
We use WhatsApp groups, which are they're not strictly subscriber only, but that they're quite good at getting people down the funnel from engagement to registration to subscription, and they offer more off-platform insight than you might get elsewhere. So that's kind of interesting. I know there's kind of experiments around subscriber-only groups and how that, access with individual columnists, reporters might work as an extra thing.
Mm-hmm. We do that kind of in two places. So we do it inside the website where we know it's subscriber only. We have chats in the comments and things like that. But more interestingly, we've got a few Facebook groups, and they're on really niche topics. We've got a book club, we've got a film club, we've got a fantasy football group. And so really, really kind of engaged on one thing. And you don't have to be a subscriber. You can kind of come along, and they are so engaged with each other. They're a little gang, and they're a little gang with us, and they chat to our journalists. And it's, on one hand, if you're a subscriber and you're getting that, in a place that you already are, because most of our subscribers are already on Facebook, you're having a great time, and you're never going to cancel your subscription, I hope. But on the other hand, if you're not a subscriber, you're getting all of this in this great place, and hopefully it can kind of push you towards that journey and thinking, what's in there? And so I think on two levels, they're doing a great thing for us, those groups.
And then for you, I guess, it's much more about engagement, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier on, we see our efforts on platforms like Insta and Snapchat as really just being about putting our journalism in front of these big, younger audiences. I think that, and subscription is not sort of like certainly not the short-term goal. I think that it's just about raising awareness more than anything. And I could talk a little bit about like our approach to digital subscriptions, but I'm not very well versed in it. I just know that we sort of have two broad approaches. One is that if you're already a subscriber, then we try and think about digital products as sort of adding value to the bundle. So we'll give you Espresso, which is our daily app. We'll give you stuff that for some people might be behind a paywall, but we also use digital products like our podcasts, which are completely free, as a way of reaching again like bigger audiences and putting them onto our journalism. And I think frequency is something from an editorial point of view that I am aware of, and the idea there is to sort of create, and this is kind of talking to what you're talking about, Tanit, like the relationship with your audience, to create a daily relationship. So we have our podcasts go out every day of the week apart from the weekends. Similarly, our daily app, this is something that you build into your morning subway ride into work, or you're kicking back and enjoying, money talks on a Monday on the way home. So, sorry I can't talk more about that.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
Do you want to put it out to questions?
Yeah. Has anyone got any questions? We've got quite a lot of time for questions, so please ask some.
Hello? Yeah. Hi. My name is Sylvia Loder. I'm a journalist from the Czech Republic. I work for a small magazine called Respect. And thank you for this. It was really interesting. And now I'm literally green with envy because we're a very small magazine. So just give you the scale. You have a Snapchat team and then you have a stories team. We have a one person covering our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter account. One person. And that leads me to a question I have, that we've been discussing how to use the social media more to promote our work, and the overall view was that us as journalists should promote our work more and be individually, engaged with our readers. And it takes a lot of time, because the idea is that I post a selfie with a person I'm interviewing, then I say, okay, this is the interview I was telling you about, then I have to do a follow-up. Maybe you haven't read the interview yet, but I will give you another example, another bit from the interview and so on. And it's so time-consuming, and it adds like a massive layer to work responsibility. So my question is, do you know from your experiences that the individual channels of your authors, that it works well or similarly well as the official channels of the media, or is it not? It's the official ones of the entire organization is still the main one, and the
No way. For us,
Thank you.
our organic social traffic, so not branded, so our journalists, our readers, anyone that isn't us, accounts for a far, far higher chunk of the traffic to the branded accounts. And so I say that every day. I say, we can, exactly, we can tweet your piece 10 times, and some people come over and say, why haven't you shared my piece? And I will always say, well, you need to do it, because trust, number one, readers trust a person much more than they trust a brand. They're much more likely to click through. And then secondly, that kind of relationship, if they feel like they're getting something straight from the person that wrote it, they're far more likely, firstly, to click, secondly, to stay, and thirdly, to convert. So we not only do we get better traffic from our organic social shares, but we also have a much higher conversion rate too. It's that old classic, you don't trust a brand. No one does. I don't. You don't. So... Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think the people who are the journalists who are best at it are the people who kind of give a real sense of what they're about using social media and aren't just doing it for the sake of it. I think you get out of it what you put in. So if you want to build an audience around a small place, you need to come across as knowing a lot about that place, being in that place, not just in taking photos of the people that you're interviewing, but in what you're up to or your thoughts about it. And I think you see it with columnists, a lot of columnists at the Telegraph, and I'm sure it's the same at the Times, where really every time they tweet something that is, or put on Instagram something that is in the vein of the thing that they write, they pick up fans, and that fan base around you is such a powerful thing, I think. But also finding a way that works for you is really important. We've got people who don't want to be in front of a camera, but you can build an audience by showing and telling these stories that don't involve you at the forefront, and build around that.
We don't have bylines, which that doesn't necessarily mean that our journalists aren't building relationships and using their Twitter handles to let their followers know when they've just put something up there. But I feel like I can't really talk to this. I kind of want to ask you guys a follow-up to your question, which hopefully might be of use to you, and that is, so clearly there's a value add. And this kind of follows on from what you were just saying, Beth, like what would be the low-hanging fruit if taking the photo is a hassle and it's not, working for you? Is there sort of like a minimum that journalists can do for a maximum of results?
I think make people as excited about your story as you are. You'd be surprised the amount of social posts that go out and you think, not just at the Telegraph, but everywhere, and you think, okay, you've written this story, you're obviously really excited about it. Do you actually want anyone to read it? Because you've got so much insight in your head about the context of it, and, you can tell it in whatever way you want on your own social platforms. Doesn't matter who's put the headline on or the picture or whatever. You can say, I was here, I was doing this. This is what I found out. Here's a bit from behind the scenes of the story that you wouldn't know by reading this. I think that can be really valuable.
Completely agree. I think you're in such a privileged position no matter what you're doing, and you can't underestimate how powerful that is. Some of our most successful journalists in kind of getting people back to the site are our politics ones and our sports ones, and that's because people interested in politics and sport are really interested in politics and sport, but it's also because they're showing them a world that they just couldn't see if those people weren't showing it to them. And so I think you can't underestimate that power and that value.
Thank you. It's a bit of a follow-up. About you all works for brands that are highly recognizable, with famous journalists that, as you said, bring conversion. What happened with those journalists? Did they have an interest for social? Do they help the other journalists as well in the newsroom? Or is it just something that you try to harness but let them do on their own? Thank you.
It's it's a bit of a mix for us, but what I would say is that I probably unfairly had an assumption that the younger reporters would be more native and kind of be a little bit better at it, and that was wrong. It's absolutely nothing to do with the age or experience. It's some people like doing it, some people naturally kind of like that narrative that you can kind of put out, but people are very good in different ways, and it certainly is almost entirely down to them. You know, we're there to lend a helping hand, we do training sessions and things like that, but the really good ones, they're doing it themselves, and actually everyone's doing it. You know, everyone's mum's on whatever and this and that and so I think storytellers can tell a story no matter where they are, and so it's really not about knowing how to use a tech or a platform or whatever. It's about their inherent ability to tell a really fascinating story, and they're the ones that are best at it, and they're the ones that are best at doing it in the paper too.
I'd like to know if there is any platform you feel you are missing out in this moment, and how would you try to land on a different platform from scratch to build a relationship with your audience?
I'm sorry, I missed the start of your question.
Sorry, I'd like to know if there is any platform you feel you are missing out in this moment. I know you work specifically on one platform, but if you all could start from tomorrow building a new relationship with your audience on a different platform, what would it be?
Well, technically I am starting on Monday, so not tomorrow, with kind of trying to it's not a blank slate, but I'm definitely going to be trying to build our relationship with our audience there in a and it's actually coming back to the question about KPIs. I was speaking with my manager about this the other day, and I was like, well, what are we hearing? And he's like, well, no, I think we'll just go out, we'll experiment, and we'll see, which seems sensible to me. I guess I would go with Instagram for now because, you know, as everyone knows, 1 billion monthly users. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. I think that the short-form visual format is one that is going to be around for a while. I think that given how Facebook's been through lately, I think there's probably more of an appetite for Instagram, and also that's borne out by sort of the data, and in terms of the amount of time people are spending there. So my pick would be Instagram, but that's a very boring pick. I wish I knew more about the ecosystem, but I'm interested in Instagram in part because I'm going to be devoting like a lot more attention to it as of Monday.
I don't think you can or should ever go platform first. I don't think you should say, I want to be on TikTok, I'm going to do this. I think you should always go audience first. Who are they? Where are they? What do they want? Then you go content. Okay, I know who they are now, I'm going to choose what to give them. Then you go format. What is the best format for this story, for this, you know, wonderful piece of journalism? And then you go, okay, where am I going to put it? What time do I put it? Who are they? Where are they? What are they doing on there? What conversations are they having on there? And so I think there are loads of places that I want to test and I want to learn and do kind of quick run experiments on. But I think that should always kind of start with who are these people, and maybe finding out who they are and then saying, okay, they're all on TikTok. I don't think they are, but but you know, it's really starting with the readers, I think.
That's such a great answer.
Yeah, I agree.
I've opened TikTok.
Oh, that's such a cop-out.
I've opened, just to add, I've opened TikTok twice and it freaked me out so much I had to close it.
Yeah.
So I would like to understand it a bit more.
What is TikTok?
It's like a video that you just have to get it. It's inexplicable.
We'll show you after this.
Maybe I'm old.
No, I want a glass of wine after this. I don't want some TikTok. Sorry.
It might be good with some wine. Yeah. I'd like to, you know, be a successful publisher on there. I'd like to understand what on earth's going on. I might dedicate some time to that in the near future. I'd definitely like to get more out of our Instagram stories. I think it's just a really good test bed for a lot of different things, a lot of different ways of telling stories, and a lot more growth on Instagram, I think. I mean, that's what I'm into at the moment. Next
I'm actually
time,
curious to
TikTok.
know what you guys do on WhatsApp, but we can, I don't know if that's of interest to everybody else. Yeah. Yeah.
How do journalists reach people on that platform?
creepily. No, no, I was being tongue in cheek. But it does require having phone numbers for people.
I think this is going to be that. I think this is going to be the big challenge of the next, however long, maybe forever. How we reach people in private networking, right? So we have groups at the Telegraph. At the moment, they're quite labour intensive, right? So you have to send the same message over and over again to different broadcast lists. They're effective. They are really highly engaged. They don't scale that well.
Do you want to talk about the limits? Because my understanding is that you have to. It's a pretty small group, right?
Right, so you basically say that you want to be added and then added to a list, but the limit is 256 people.
Something like that, yeah.
So you send that group a message, and then when you've hit your limit, you start another one, same group, but you send out another message. It's a whole thing. I don't actually deal with that, thankfully, but I hear it takes a long time. So, I mean, there's the good things about it. Our journalists are way more willing to get involved because they'll take questions, and I guess the questions that they're getting and the responses are private. You know, no one's showing off about what they want to say about something. They're genuinely interested and a bit more protected. It's a bit more like getting a letter. So this conversation between you and the person, that's really good. It doesn't scale up that well. From what I understand, WhatsApp aren't dead keen for it to be a thing that scales up really well, even in like a verified situation. I think it'll be a challenge, and I think it'll change the way that we distribute information. But we know that a lot of our readers are already sharing our stories through dark social and on WhatsApp and on Messenger, and it's not a huge surprise that would be happening. It's definitely more appealing in the kind of safe space that it creates online that I think there's a massive absence of.
I'm having a bit of an
Yes and no,
existential, is this our job? Like, should we be doing that? Do we just make it really, really shareable and really, really easy to share? And
I think
do we let them do it, or do we try and be more? Do we try to be WhatsApp contacts with them? I don't know the answer, and it's a big important question, I think.
Yeah, I think it raises questions around privacy, around verification, around expectations we have when we are in a safe space. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone else attended the conversation between Fergus and, I've forgotten the guy's name who was at WhatsApp. Yeah. And I think that that was looking at sort of, test cases. The test case they were looking at was the Indian election and trying to verify various misinformation that might be shared, and kind of at the back of it with a concern around harm and harmful images that have been distributed to these massive groups in India that have led to some horrible things happening. I realise that's different, but I think that it does, as you said, there's a lot of questions ranging from privacy to, do we want to be in that space? And we'll probably be here next year, and I'll be like, so now I'm doing WhatsApp stories, and I've got to say it's great.
I think to leave on a high, to your point, a good story travels well. It always will. People pass on things that they want to share, and a lot of the ways that we make content work on social and make people subscribe is in getting that initial thing right, which is no answer to that question.
Yeah.
But time's up.
Yeah.
So
time's
I
up.
hope you learned something.
But also just to end on a high and say that, I think that regardless of like the channels of distribution, regardless of conversion journeys, regardless of subscriber numbers, I think that even though there's been a lot on the crisis of journalism that's been discussed these past few days, at the end of the day, like I don't really think that storytelling and ethical storytelling is at a critical juncture. I think people care really greatly about it, and there are plenty of people who are making good journalism out there, and we'll muddle through. Much like
What's the future, Beth?
What's the future?
Of social?
Yeah.
Oh, private networks we can't access, and we won't be able to monitor. Are we done? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
We're getting kicked out now.
Okay.
Thank you for coming on a Saturday night.